you're really holding people accountable for what comes out of their mouth. And not that we need to, I don't mean to sound puffy about that, but there's power in that to really get people grounded, like get back down and get your feet on the ground.
I'm Leon Davis, and this is One Good Question. Hello, and welcome to another episode of One Good Question. These are some really different times we're in right now. With this being my first release since most of us have been confined to our homes, I'm going to spend a small amount of time kind of talking about what's going on. If you don't already know, I am part of the restaurant industry, so where I work has actually been affected. But I am fortunate that I am a member of the management team and on a salary and part of a large corporation. So I have yet to be, I guess, officially furloughed, and still collecting a paycheck. But unfortunately for my team members and millions of other restaurant workers out there, that is not the case. A lot of my friends are still in the restaurant industry. In fact, the vast majority of my friends are in the restaurant industry. So it's something that is being felt across my friendship base. But I'm not going to become like a news source. Whenever I find something that is either insightful or hopeful, I will post that and make it available on all my social channels. You can find all of those on the show notes. Just click the link. But I digress. Today's guest is Dusti Unger. She is a food blogger and someone I have worked with in the past briefly. She is someone who, while I was working with, I learned quite a bit. We talk a little bit about food and her blog, which is called Every Dang Dish. She gave me a new way to look at the advice of don't make assumptions or to not jump to assumptions. I really enjoyed this. Always enjoyed talking to Dusti. Haven't had an opportunity to talk to her since we stopped working together. It was a great conversation. Enjoyed it quite a bit. I think you all will too. I will go ahead and get you to Dusti Unger answering her one good question.
Dusti, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's Friday. I'm good.
Yes, Friday. Thank goodness Friday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Crazy times. All right. So your question today is, I find that my favorite meals and dishes are ones that I associate with specific times or events in my life. What are some of the meals and or dishes that are the most emotionally poignant for you? And what are the memories and stories that are connected to them?
I love this question. And it's really hard to kind of just think of a couple to narrow this down, but I was able to do it. So the first one that came to mind, and it's so funny because I'm actually making this tonight for dinner, which is kind of ironic. But when I was in college, my roommate, she's the one who really taught me how to be in the kitchen. And so it all started with, the basics. Like, I'm going to teach you a couple basic dishes that you can make. And that's where it all began. And one of those first recipes was beef enchiladas. Not an overly complicated meal to make, but there's so much memories behind that. It's truly where my love for the kitchen started. And it's a meal that I make all the time because it's easy, and I'm making it tonight because I can freeze it. I mean, let's just face it, right? Freezer meals. But what's really special about this recipe is I made this for John when we were dating. And when he proposed, he flew in because we were dating long distance. So I was here in Plano, John was in Lubbock, and he flew in, surprised me, hijacked my friend Stevie's kitchen for the day. And he made these enchiladas for me and picked me up and whisked me away to the Arboretum, and we had a dinner picnic, and he proposed over these enchiladas. So very special. I've taught this dish and this recipe to so many friends that were getting started in the kitchen because, again, it's easy and it's really good. So that would be my number one. My second recipe reminds me of my mom. So my mom passed away. It'll be 6 years. Actually, the beginning of March is 6 years. It's crazy. And growing up, she would make this pie. We called it Patty's Pie. And it became something that I just loved. And it was the dessert that I wanted for my birthday year over year. My dad loves it. And it's a pecan crust with kind of like that cream cheese and that kind of dream whip, if you will. And you combine those two. It's just this nice white, fluffy, cheesy kind of filling. And then typically what we would do is we'd get a can of blueberry filling and put it on top, and then you refrigerate it and serve it cold. And it's just, it's fabulous. So every time I have that dish, I always think of my mom, but it came from my Aunt Patty. So we call it Patty's Pie. And the third dish that really brings a lot of memories for me is what I'm calling Anna's gravy. So Anna is an absolute dear friend of mine, and she is now like an adopted mom to me. So I met Anna back in 2005 when I was working at PepsiCo. She was actually one of our consultants, and we worked together on trade shows and whatnot. And over the course of time, it became business colleagues to friends. She moved to Dallas for a period. We were roommates, and now she's, back up north, but she has truly just been this kindred friend. And she grew up in New York and has this Italian kind of background, and the woman can cook like nobody's business. And so she introduced me to her gravy, which is what the Italians call it, but it's essentially meatballs with red sauce. And it's all, obviously homemade. So she taught this recipe to me. She cooked it for me and my friends many a times. And so when we were living together, we cooked a lot. And I was telling her, we need to get your recipes in print. I mean, selfishly, like I just want them in print so I can have them, because they're like all scattered in her head, and like, oh, that recipe's up in Minnesota. Like, I'm like, So it was an 8-year project, Leon, and we launched this cookbook. I printed it in December, and it was just an absolute blessing. I mean, it ebbed and flowed. I was at the mercy of recipes, and time got in the way. Her husband got really ill, and he passed away a year ago in May. And he was able to see this come, to fruition, which is kind of nice. But it's just been a gift. And so her gravy is something I cook for friends and family. And it is just a tried and true recipe that just wins everyone over. So it's not just meatballs and red sauce. There is a lot of emotion, and there's a lot of history to that recipe. So, it inspired a cookbook. So if I had to pick 3 recipes, those would be the 3. So
yeah, it's cool how like food is such a emotional thing, and how sometimes we don't really think about it until you're asked to think about it. You're like, wow, yeah, that's something where I'm really connected to. So yeah, some of my favorite dishes are just times of my life.
Yep.
All right. Well, great. That was awesome. What was the name of that cookbook again?
So there's a link on my blog, everydangdish.com, and I tell the short story about how the cookbook came to fruition, but it's called Circle of Friends Cookbook. I built it in blurbs. So again, when this all started, I really, truly was just building like a photo album book into a cookbook for the purpose of her and I. Well, when word on the street got out, everybody was like, I want a copy. So it's not cheap because it's a photo book, right? But it's out there if people are interested. There's 60 some odd recipes in there, and they're fantastic. And I sprinkled in a couple, but yeah. So the link is on my blog.
All right, cool. I'll add that to the show notes, actually.
Okay.
All right, cool. So you ready for the house question?
I'm ready.
All right. Tell me a piece of advice that you received, ignored. Now looking back, you wish you would have followed.
So when I read this question, I immediately went to a place of this women's leadership program I took 2 years ago. I was a graduate about 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Wow. And it was an experience that literally changed my life. And I was really trying to uncover like, what is the one thing that I learned? So it's not so much to your question of like, what advice did I not heed? But if I had to give anybody some words of wisdom that I wish I was given at a much younger age and really, truly practiced, it's asking yourself, in any given moment, when faced with the opportunity to start assuming, is ask yourself what else could be true. And that goes in the workplace, that goes in our personal lives with our partners and our family members and our friends. We so often go to a place of assumption, projection, and judgment without asking ourselves, well, what else could be going on? What else could be true? And we're so quick to, if we don't have the finished story, we will make up the rest of the story in our head. And it's dangerous ground. And I think today, more than ever, there's a lot of that going on because it's coming from a place of fear. It's coming from a place of unknown and doesn't make it right. So in answer to your question, I think just stopping, taking a deep breath and asking yourself, what else could be true? Why else is or isn't something happening or not happening? And it really, I think, will keep you grounded and keep your perspective in check and make you be very responsible in your response versus that knee-jerk reaction of, well, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? So that is something I wished I would have really learned at a younger age. So.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that one too. That was probably the most useful as far as what I'm doing mentally. That one of those pieces that I'm going to incorporate. The way you stated it is clear and concise, and probably all thought about it on different levels, but that kind of gets to the root of it. Like,
yeah,
we need to stop and ask what else could be true in this moment, as opposed to jumping to that assumption.
And there's power. Just imagine yourself having a conversation with a colleague or with a friend or whoever, and they're starting to project and assume. And just think of the power that you have when you say, you know what, Leon? Well, what else could be true? And then stop talking and let them really marinate and think about what you said. And you're really holding people accountable for what comes out of their mouth. And not that we need to, I don't mean to sound puffy about that, but there's power in that to really get people grounded, like get back down and get your feet on the ground.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Real quick, I want to give you a second to talk about what you're doing with your blog. So what's going on with Every Dang Dish?
I love it. So the love of cooking obviously has just grown over the years. And I have kind of fought this internal idea of starting a food blog. And I just kept going to this place of, does the world really need another food blogger? I mean, let's face it, right? And I just couldn't get this idea out of my head. And then, of course, this cookbook started, and was part of this journey. But what really kind of kicked this off for me is I once a month volunteer with a group of women, and a lot of them are entrepreneurs. And they really were the catapult for me to just kind of hit the go button. And I'm like, you know what? If these women can make clothing out of their homes and sell it, and make charcuterie boards and sell it, like, I can do a food blog. And that's really how this all started. But I also wanted to kind of dive into this digital marketing kind of social space and learn. And I thought, what better way to do it than create your own brand and just jump in and teach yourself WordPress, go to meetups and connect with developers, and like a whole new world has opened up for me. So it's just been really invigorating and a huge learning curve, but I've been enjoying it so much. So how did Every Dang Dish come to be? So John is an extremely, he's just amazing when it comes to the kitchen and helping me out. And he'll do the dishes more often than I ever would have imagined. So one night years ago, he's doing the dishes and he's like, man, we use every dang dish, because we're literally unloading the dishwasher every other day. Like, I'm not even kidding. So when we were kind of thinking about, well, what do I call this food blog, right? And then it just like clicked, like, every dang dish. We use every dang dish. And so anyway, that's kind of how it all came to be. I bought my domain in December of 2018, started getting into WordPress and all that stuff and learning how to build a website. Like I knew nothing about it. So it took a year. I have been blessed with people that have donated their time, their resources. It has been an incredible journey. And this thing went live online February 1st. So that's kind of how it all started. And so I'm focusing on the blog, having new content a couple times a week. I'm posting daily on Instagram. So I encourage anyone who's interested in this to follow me on Instagram. And then of course, Pinterest. I'm pinning recipes from all over the place. So not just mine, but just anything that looks great, I pin it. So follow my content if that interests you. So
awesome. That sounds like fun. I already follow you on Instagram. So lots of good stuff. Dusti, thank you for your time. I appreciate it and look forward to watching the growth of the blog and having you on at a later date when you're exploding, and we'll see how things are going then.
Perfect. I appreciate it.
Once again, that was Dusti Unger, and her website is Everydang Dish. I'll have links to everything in the show notes. Thank you.
So that was Dusti Unger answering her one good question. I am really excited to see what happens with her and her blog and her cookbook going forward. Remember, there are links to both in the show notes. I would like to thank Dusti once again. And just to let you all know, there is another project that I'm working on while we're all at home being shut-ins. I figured it'd be a good time to work on other projects. So you'll get to hear a little bit more of my voice here in the future, and just keep your eyes out for that. We've already started recording, so I should have that project available here pretty soon. Hopefully in the next week and a half or so. I will keep you updated. Check social for that. Once again, check the show links. And with that, I would like to wish you all well and be safe out there. Thank you for listening to One Good Question. I'm Leon Davis. Theme music by DJ Seth Lowry. Find us on Spotify and Apple Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts. For a full list of where to find us, check out our Facebook page, or click the link in the show notes.